What do you think the short term and the long term goals are? Let's start with the short term goals of like the I'll class it as the atheist slash humanist slash secular movement would be.
Oh, okay. And look, I think we should put this in the context of the so-called new atheism. Whenever I use the expression new atheism, I always precede it with the word so-called, because it's not necessarily a term of our choosing. But since about 4 or 5 years ago, there has been this, this plethora of books and articles and public appearances and so on by particularly people like Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, Christopher Hitchens and others. It's become quite intense. And I think there's a reason for that. I think it is that a lot of people who are atheists or secular have got to the point where they are very worried about the role of religion in the modern world. They've discovered, we have discovered, that the secularisation of thesis was at least a simplification. In other words, religion is not going away, and it continues to cause trouble in a lot of ways and must be challenged. So we do have this change since, let's say, about 5 years ago. Now, the goals in that context, I think, one goal is simply to challenge religion in a plausible way. But why are we trying to do that? Well, perhaps in the short term, one of the things we want to do is at least have a rallying point. We want people who are of a secular mind, atheists, skeptics, humanists and so on, to be able to identify themselves to the larger society, but to each other. And, there are a lot of people out there who kind of lonely. They kind of may not have realised until recently that they weren't the only one in their town. Probably more in countries like the United States than here, but all the same, having some kind of rallying point for those people and some chance to have a kind of sense of community and to be able to provide intellectual content that those people can use. That is all very important in the very short term. I think also, in the reasonably short term, though, we do want to challenge the deference that religion is given. Religion still in the public sphere is thought of as something that's beneficial, something that contains some wisdom to it, even if it's not true in the sense that the God that a particular religion describes is really there or really has those characteristics. Nonetheless, it seems to be assumed in the public and the political, the social spheres, that religion has some kind of wisdom to it. Well, a counter view should be put that maybe that is not the place to find wisdom, and maybe that kind of deference should no longer apply. And maybe there are irreligious views that contain just as much wisdom. That has to be put out there in a strong way, in a popular way, a way that has some kind of widespread acceptance behind it. So that's a short-term view. And the longer term aim is actually to start eroding that deference. I don't think the long-term goal should be something like we will annihilate religion. I don't think that it's not realistic. Religion of one kind or another is always going to be around. The longer-term goal is to challenge it in the public sphere. And maybe to reach a point, I think the ideal we can reach is something like what's been reached in Scandinavia already, where the role of religion in the public sphere is now very much reduced. Many people identify themselves when asked as not being religious. Many people do not believe in any kind of supernatural being or force or power. And those societies are now very secular indeed, even more so than a society like Australia, which is also much more secular than the United States. We need to push to the point where the whole world, ideally, some utopian dream of this, becomes much more like Denmark or Norway or Sweden, those sorts of societies. That, I think, is achievable. Achieving it in Australia is maybe not that far away. Achieving it in a country like the United States is a lot further away, but I don't believe it's impossible. We should not be so pessimistic that we think that's impossible. Obviously, achieving it in other parts of the world, developing countries, is going to take a lot longer. But that ideal can be pursued over time in a realistic manner.
So it's a good answer actually. So what wouldn't you like to hear like an atheist say, or at least a well-known atheist in the limelight of the spotlight? Okay. What wouldn't you like to hear somebody like Richard Dawkins or Daniel Dennett?
I wouldn't like them to talk in a way that suggests they think we can eradicate religion,
Mm.
short term or even long term. I think once you start talking like that, you're starting to talk in that sort of apocalyptic way that's not realistic, and may make you start doing things that are not only unrealistic but may be damaging. You know, if you take strong political action to try to suppress religious views, for example, you know, that's not something that I want to see, and I don't want to hear people talking in a way that encourages that. If we start talking in a way where we break down the separation of church and state from our side, such that we, the atheists, stay in control of the state, and then we use the state to suppress religion, yeah, that would be very damaging. I don't want that to happen. So I'd not like to hear atheists, high-profile atheists, talking in that way. That's the one thing that I would counsel against.
Okay. Now, if you wanted the Pope or maybe the Mormon prophet to turn around and say something, what would you like to hear them say?
It's not realistic for me to expect the Pope to say, I was wrong, there is no God.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't expect anything like that. I don't expect any real retreat on the core theological presuppositions of Catholicism or whatever it might be. What I would like to hear the Pope say is this: from within my own worldview, I can find reasons to support the separation of church and state, the harm principle whereby we only ban things that are harmful from some secular point of view, and other liberal principles. I can find reason to support those things politically from within my worldview. That's what we want. That's what we should be demanding of the religious leaders and the religious organisations.
Yeah, that's a good, very thought-provoking. Okay, I've got another question here. I forgot what the next one was.
I've stunned you.
You did. It was such a good answer.
This bit's going to get edited out.
I don't know. Okay, if I get my editing skills up.